think, that would be a great thing because I've been working here for around 5 years, but I do see a lot more youngsters far more inclined to help. And today with the pandemic, with the sort of inability and the governmental failure that you're seeing across the board, irrespective of governments, of course, because not like nobody was really prepared for it, is you see far more youngsters coming in. You see the sort of frustration that a lot of youngsters have. And I really hope to engage with them. I could take the time, even if they want to ask me questions, to talk about how to go about it, how to give back, because very simply, not all politics is about elections. Not all change comes from, being an elected representative. A lot of it comes from proactively even being part of society. Even civil society is an extremely critical part of the political process in terms of democracy and engagement. And if a lot of youngsters are averse of whether BJP, Congress, or every other party that there is, even their engagement in civil society is so much more emboldening for the democratic process. And hopefully through this dialogue, we'll be able to reach that, or hopefully see more people involved.
Certainly. Aiyshwarya, so let me begin. Before we talk about your role in politics, if you could just quickly bring us up to date as to how, as such a young person, and what inspired you or what got you into politics, and where did the journey start from?
To be honest, I will make the confession that I do come from a political family. I am a fourth generation politician, with two people in my family having been MLAs, one in Piriyapatna and one in my taluk, which is KR Nagar. For me, however, politics has been something that has interested me from, let's say, 1999. I was around 5 or 6. It was my father's first election. I was lost. I was just handing out pamphlets saying vote for this person without understanding what the process was, without knowing what I was doing. But just the fact that you got to work with so many people, and it was honestly an exhilarating experience, right? From election rallies to campaigns and whatnot. I think for me back then, I was more starry-eyed about the process, where I saw how important my father was. I saw all the leaders coming in, and then we lost that election in 99. And the next was in 2004, where I was around 11, 12. At which point, I think I finally understood what the process was. We saw the struggle, we saw the fight. Fortunately, we were blessed that my father won. But for me, the idea of wanting to be in politics came after. I was raised in Bangalore. I was educated in Bangalore. But my parents made it a point that every holiday that there was, we would come back here. So when I was here and my father was serving as a legislator, you just saw the sort of impact you can have directly. A lot of us talk about change, being change makers, but my father from 7 in the morning to 8 in the night was constant help and working with people and trying to get them what they wanted. And for me, I realized that very early on, yes, there is a power trip to politics. Nobody will deny it. Everybody wants to be powerful and relevant. But the fact that you directly engage with a person who needs something. There's somebody who comes to my house, I take them to the taluk office, get their, let's say, kata cleared or even their permissions, and they go back home happier than before. It's the fact that you have that privilege to give back, and you have that power to create change directly. And in rural areas, which I'm very passionate about, that has been what it is. I don't think my family is too keen on me being in politics. A lot of families, especially for women in politics, they're very apprehensive. However, I came into politics around 6 years after my father passed away. I started off, I was very, very lucky. I just finished law. Professor Rajiv Gowda, who was a member of Parliament and the head of the All India Congress Research Department, offered me a job. I worked with him for a year, came back to Karnataka to try and contest, was not given the ticket, which actually in hindsight was probably a blessing, because I got to work with the top leadership in terms of research and media, and which is where I was made a spokesperson. And the All India communications in charge, Randeep Singh Surjewala, noticed me and gave me an opportunity to move to the national platform. However, though I'm very passionate about being a spokesperson, I think for the past year and a half, almost 2, I've been exclusively on the ground. I love working on the ground more than being on air, even though it's a great distinction and I do hold national posts. And hopefully I see myself contesting from the grassroots. I don't want to contest an MLA election anytime soon or an MP election. I'd like to start from the panchayat level because that's where actual change happens. I've worked here for long enough to know that that's where, and this is where we are with my political journey thus far.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Aiyshwarya, so there are a few parts of this conversation that we have that I've picked up. One very difficult thought that I have every day in my mind is, what does a politician do, correct? And you said your father was helping people from 7 to 9 in the evening. So as young people in this audience, including me, can you give us some insight on what is the life of a politician, correct? What happens when you get up and what is the activity that runs around?
So there's a long-standing joke here with my team that the minute I wake up, I go to the police station. So I'll tell you what it is. The role of a politician, whether you're elected or not, is to basically be accessible to people to help, irrespective of political party. So my job is not to basically be on stage or programs or making speeches, because that is a larger idea of like state level leaders and what they do. My job, honestly, sitting in my taluk starts from, it's a lot of engagement with society, in the sense that if somebody's been arrested overnight or there's some crime that has happened or somebody wants to go to court, morning I go to the police station when people call me, then we go to the taluk office if there's help that the people need with the governmental offices there. Then it comes to, honestly, because of the pandemic, it has stopped because of protocol, but otherwise it's also may sound funny, but I would do anywhere from 8 to 10 weddings a day and even funerals, because where we come from, a large part of being part of the society is attending and being seen as paying respect to people's events. So a lot and that it sounds probably very odd for people to see what a politician does, but then the actual work actually comes down to reviewing villages. For example, all of that is a general thing, but for example, what happens is if I want to contest as Jilla Panchayat, what preparation do I have? It means that if I have 45 villages within my hobli or the seat that I want to contest, it means I have to go to every one of the villages. I have to see what the panchayat members are, who the panchayat members are, what work we can get for them, look at the booths and what the strength of the booth is, because at the end of it, to win an election, it's not a juggernaut cult of personality. It is every single booth that counts. So for me, on a general day would be that. I would do around 6 to 8 villages. I would talk to the panchayat leaders, to talk to the seniors that are there, how we can help. So we've done a lot of wonderful work. I'm very blessed to have been able to work with a team that helps, from electrifying a village, which, around 80 houses were left out of the village plan, so they didn't have electricity, to even allowing, facilitating panchayat members to get roads. The privilege is I may not be elected, but I am known not because of me, but because of the fact that we've had the family in the services and whatnot. So it helps. And during COVID, I think, was probably the point where it wasn't politics. It was more about service, that we've been able to stitch 1 lakh masks. We got the women of my taluk to stitch 1 lakh masks and we provided it to everybody. We did safety kits. We're still doing, my house feels like a sanitizer factory, honestly, we're still distributing safety kits, sanitizers, masks. And now, right now is probably the worst part or the worst time to be in social service or politics, because every morning you wake up with somebody saying, we need a bed, we need oxygen, we need to go to the district hospital. And this is probably the worst time for anybody, because nobody should have to, scramble and beg and ask, and you're begging and asking that. This is the greatest equalizer period for everybody, including politicians. I think I was really odd about the answer, but
through this process of you spending an entire day in doing these things, I'm sure you must have come across people who are extremely critical about politicians in general, politics in general. In fact, I also believe that politics is the most judged profession inside this country. And a lot of harsh remarks are made on political parties, on politicians. Per se, how do you keep yourself going, even though there are so many harsh comments, so many critical people always trying to pinpoint fingers on your mistakes?
I think criticism comes at two levels. I think a lot of the criticism about the work I do and whatnot probably comes from my urban life, as in probably from the cities, probably from people that have a very myopic view of what politicians do. See, there's this preconceived notion of what politicians are, what politicians do. And for all of them, it's a picture of a babu who's basically wearing tons of gold, probably drinking and getting suitcases of money. While honestly
Right.
speaking, maybe if we had a life like that, it would be easier. But a lot of it is this preconceived notion of what people think politicians are. Right. So when they give you the criticism, the thing that I use to to basically save myself or keep myself focused is I know what my people need. I come from the back of beyond. I come from a very rural constituency, and I know exactly what these people need and how I'm there for them. It may be the tiniest help. It may be even just sending them a little bit of help if they've had a funeral, or even going to the police station to talk for them. But I understand how it helps. And in rural areas, political skepticism or skepticism about politicians isn't as great, because for them, politicians are their access to get anything. It's sad because in this democracy, they're entitled to their rights. So whether it is, ration, or whether it is education, whether it is midday meals, but we are their go-to in order to talk to the bureaucracy to get them what they want. Right. So for me, my priority is, honestly, my people are my priority. So I have absolutely no qualms with all the people in the urban area saying, what are politicians doing? And I just tell them, you know what? Come spend a day in my life. My day begins at 5 a.m. It ends at 11. I will take you all along. I will feed you in the process. But please come do what I do for one day, and then we'll talk. Because youngsters especially, I feel they're extremely disillusioned with the system. And that's extremely, extremely dangerous for a country. Because for them, what they see is what the media is showing. The media runs on TRP. They're not showing you half of what politicians do. For every 50% of really bad politicians, there are at least 30 to 40%, let's say, people who are sincere. And for me, at the end of it, I live by the principle that if I feel like I've done well enough that I can sleep through the night in peace, I'm fine. And honestly, I've been fine in terms of sleep cycles. So I think
just taking one pointer from what you just said, that try and spend a day with me. I will take the liberty of extending the invitation to the students who are listening to us, that if you ever want to spend a day with her, please write her an email, and please try and oblige. Our students will be certainly excited to see how this works.
I'd love to. I'm going to make you all paint a school, because that's my next plan. I'm going to start doing infrastructure upgrades for schools, so I'll have free labor. Perfect.
Awesome. I'm sure students are excited about that. Actually, also try and make me understand. So since you spoke about how it is difficult for women in politics, how it is difficult for young people in politics, how for every bad politician there is a good politician. What are the values that you run by yourself every day, correct? What keeps you on the right track every day? Because I'm sure there will be a lot of tempting wrong things that will be coming with so much power. What are the things that you tell yourself? What are the values that you keep with yourself that keeps you going on the right track?
See, I think politics, much like any other field, is much harder for youngsters, except maybe like the startup ecosystem, but is extremely hard for women and youngsters because of the entry barriers. Much like the corporate world, where it's still hard for women to still even pay parity, right? Even things like pay parity do not exist. And even in the corporatized world, where you have checks and balances like HR and your code of ethics, politics does not really work on that. So what you have to do throughout is to survive, is to internalize a code of ethics, what you will live by. My mother has been probably my greatest influence after my father. And when I was joining politics, she says, Aiyshwarya, at a young age, it is very easy to be tempted to take the wrong way of whether making money and other things, right? However, I would much rather have you work 10 years longer, as long as your self-respect, your integrity, and your morals are not compromised. And for me, that has always been my value, that I will wait longer. I live by 3 Ps. I live by persistence, perseverance, and patience. And I will continue to follow. I don't know what my political career holds. I don't know if I'll get a ticket or not. But I am at no point going to veer off my own set and code of how I want to function as a politician. Right. Because if I have my own flaws, my father always used to say, if you have your own flaws, or if you're morally bankrupt, or if you have, your own sort of corruption, you can never walk into a room with your head held high. In right. Kannada, he would say, ನಾನು ಯಾರ ಹತ್ರನೂ ದುಡ್ಡು ತಗೊಂಡಿಲ್ಲ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲೇ ಹೋದ್ರು ಏನ್ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಯಾರಿಗೂ obligation ಇಲ್ಲ, right? So when you don't feel that sort of like being obligated to somebody, or feeling like you committed a crime, and if your conscience is clear, I think you'll get further. But I see this today. I see a lot of youngsters especially, being taken in by the idea that politics is a quick buck, that politics is a quick rise to fame and fortune or relevant, that they believe that they do one piece of charity and getting 10 media channels makes them a leader. But that's necessarily not it. Politics is a game of persistence and perseverance, right? And politics at the end of it has to be to serve somebody else. Politics is not self-serving. Politics honestly feels like a charitable exercise with the payoff of maybe being an elected representative someday. Right. So I think over time, I hopefully see that a lot of these people get weeded out of the system. Right. A lot of people that want in for the quick ride to make something of themselves, they can't survive. Because right. My father used to say, you need to be mad. You need to be insane to want to be in politics. Because it is give, and at some point you may get back. So for me, right. I think I'm clinically insane because I was a pretty good lawyer back in the day. I used to be pretty all right, and then gave up right. all of it to be here. And right. It's an addiction. What do you say?
Right. Aiyshwarya, you were talking about entry barriers, correct? In popular belief, people also believe that you need a lot of money to start off in politics. And that becomes an entry barrier in people's mind, saying that only if you have a lot of money, only then you can be a part of active politics. Do you think that holds true, or do you think there are other ways to remove that entry barrier from our life and still be part of politics?
Okay, so one thing is, I believe I'm very lucky in the opportunities I've gotten. But the thing now of politics is money is no longer a differentiator. There used to be a time where money used to put you apart here, there, whatnot. But money now has become, there is so much money in the ecosystem that it honestly does not matter. Everybody has money or everybody doesn't have money. That doesn't become the precursor. If you want to enter politics in terms of the organization, there are several ways. Today, I will talk about, this Srinivas BV, who's my National Youth Congress president. He's from Shimoga. He comes from a very, like a family that could make do, middle class, lower middle class, lost his father very young, not financially very secure. And he's the national president. Today, he's the man that is rallying around lakhs of youth Congress boys across the country to provide oxygen, to provide beds, and he's serving. How did he get into politics? He got into politics through organization. He was in the student union, then he went to Youth Congress, and it wasn't money. It is hard work and capability. How did I get my posts? I didn't pay for it. Being a spokesperson to survive and be doing well is not based on how much money you have, right? It's how well you do on air. And these right. are checks and balances that exist. For right. every person that probably throws around money to get by, there are 10 other people that will work 10 times harder to get in. Right. My entry barriers, I will admit, did not exist as much as other people that I've seen. Because again, I was born into a political family. However, success is not dictated by dynasty. I have seen people, it's a foot in the door. What you make of it after is what determines your success. Because for every successful dynasty, you see 4 of them who have failed. So, right. That is also an argument. And the other part is, I think today, like Youth Congress, NSUI, any of your students also want to get involved because they're doing a lot of relief work even in Mysore. That's a great way to start. It's all about interactions and working hard to prove yourself until the leadership notices you're worth something. they'll obviously reward you. And then when it comes to electoral politics, there are far more different variables, because you have to be on the ground, you have to have, and money, yes, you can't say no. But I think until that point for youngsters, there's a lot of avenues and opportunities.
Right. Breaking all the stereotypes in politics, we have you in front of us, correct? Like you said, we assume or we think about politicians in a very different way. But here we have a well-educated, young, a well-spoken, a powerful politician in the making, correct? I want to ask you, what do you think is the importance of education through this process of politics, and how has that helped you shape or become a better politician?
So the thing is, there are two answers to this. I know education is a precursor to understanding politics better, but education is not a prerequisite to be in politics. I'll tell you why. A lot of people say you need to have minimum educational qualification, all of that, understood. But some of the smartest politicians I have met, be it my panchayat members, be it my standing committee members, all of them, by sheer birth have been uneducated. Right. But their education has been on the ground. Their education is living life, trying to make ends meet, and then serving people and coming into politics. It is great if there are more educated people in politics. I will 100% agree, right? However, to say you need to be educated to a certain extent in order to be in politics is necessarily unfair. Because you and I have the privilege of being educated. Everybody here who wants to be in politics will come out with a degree. I have a law degree, right? But there are also people who are probably far more capable on the ground, know their ground better, who want to contest, for whom education was never offered. Yet forward education is going to become pretty much a standard, because you've seen, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan happening. So that generation of people are growing up. But there are a lot of other people, previous generations, let's say pre-2000s or even pre-1990, who genuinely did not have the opportunity and have lost out. So to tell them they're not good at what they do because of education is false. It's a fallacy, because capability and being able to perform on the ground matters. But the larger idea, yes, I believe if you want to be a policymaker, to have a certain amount of knowledge about what policies you're making is extremely critical. I survive with a lot of my research work that I do, or even a lot of my debate, because I'm a lawyer, because of the fact that I did have a legal education, which allows me to probably understand the laws better. I did law because of the fact, not that I wanted to practice, because my father said, if you want to be making laws, you should know what the law is. You should be able to draft laws. You should be able to understand it. So education in itself is great. It's a wonderful prerequisite for people to have, because you won't feel as, ignorant when it comes down to it. Right? When people, like I've seen non-lawyers talk about constitutional law, and in my head, I'm a little judgmental, of course, saying you don't understand it, but I can't fault them because they're not lawyers. But hopefully going forward, everybody will have a base minimum education. Otherwise, we'll have policies as bad as the central government right now. So.
Agreed. I will come to that. I will hold the thought of talking about the central government for a bit. But before we get to that point, you have been on the panel, on the media panels throughout the past 3-4 years on national debates, state level debates, and so many other things. I want to know, with your experience, that what happens on screen versus what happens off screen. Does the fight continue? If I'm arguing with you, do I continue arguing even after the panel is done, or are we just friends after that?
Okay, so honestly speaking, I used to be one of those people that would be like, if you are arguing against me at the debate, we're not going to talk after. But I think on certain issues, especially when it comes to women and child or grave crimes, that if you see somebody from the opposite side actually arguing against rationality and against a crime that is in favor of a crime that has happened, I don't think anybody wants to even talk to them after that. However, I've seen in TV studios going up and about that there are people across the political spectrum. See, for me, what I speak is my commitment. It comes from my heart, right? There are a lot of other people that have to defend the indefensible. So they go out there, they talk, they come back and they say, I'm sorry, I've had this. I do have a lot of well-wishers and friends across the political spectrum that even after we're fighting on air, we get off air, I'm obviously huffing and puffing, because to me, it is what I believe, but they
Right.
come up and say, I'm very sorry, this is what we have to do.
Right.
So
Right.
sometimes, very few times does it carry on, but more often than not, I think especially for across the board, not the Congress, because we're very committed to what we're saying, right? It's liberal, it's logical, it makes sense. A lot of them just say, we're sorry, you know, it's a job, we have to do it. So you can't help but feel bad for them and just wonder, like, you know, thank your stars that you're not on that side.
Right. Actually, through the years and through so many discussions, people tell us not to trust the TV, not to trust news channels, not to trust these medias of information very often. What do you think about how politicians utilize social media? Should they utilize it more?
There's a lot of...
Sorry, there's some background noise. I request the students to put their speakers on mute. Okay, yeah. So since you said that we shouldn't trust news outlets, and that's not the 100% truth, how do you utilize social media, or how do you make sure that your message goes forward right? And how impactful has been the use of social media in your life?
To be very honest, I think, you know, the media or yellow journalism is probably one of the greatest, like, you know, risks or threats in the country today. I think over time, media houses lost their legitimacy. There are very few media houses that still cater to the actual truth, either across the spectrum, right? And also issues that they pick up. It's all TRP based. There's one is TRP based, and the second is there is an obligation for them to toe a certain line, because obviously the Ministry of I&D is not going to let them be. So because this happened, it reached a point of saturation where social media became the sort of platform for engagement, right? It became a two-way street of engagement. It was no longer a newspaper telling me what it was. It was real-time, verified sort of interaction and discussion. And social media is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have today in terms of engagement with people and reach. Because whether you like it or not, just the fact that Jio has come in with such cheap internet connections has pushed everybody on WhatsApp, has pushed everybody on Facebook. Like, I have people in villages with probably no running water, but have a Jio connection and on WhatsApp, which they also used to tell me that there's no water. So I think social media became everybody's individual space of expression. It also became a counter narrative that mainstream media was giving you one story, while social media turned around and said, no, this is the truth. When, for example, when Hathras was happening, I know, like, initially before the reports and everything came in, that you saw one journalist who was tweeting about it. Even if her channel did not necessarily believe it, she was there. She was on ground and she was risking her professional career because she personally truth being suppressed. Has been for TV studios and all of that. I am very weary of all media. You will not see me on TV interviews of my own. You will not see me doing press conferences. You will never see me doing interviews, like, you know, interacting with the media per se, except occasionally if I have to, if I'm forced to do it, because of the fact that I would rather build my presence with the actual common people on the ground. My social media is used extensively for all the work that I do. Nothing goes out on paid media whatsoever. All of it is for people to see. I am easily accessible. I believe in me as a politician. I am not the person you call 4 people for in order to get in touch with me. My number is for everybody. You call me, I will reply. Otherwise, I have a team that you can call and reply. So social media is the same for me. It's a two-way street, and it's been great. Like, from issues that are happening to how I can help, to wonderful response and, you know, very encouraging people, not just from Mysore per se, but from all across the state and nationally. You know, I love the fact that I can sit in Bangalore and I can have somebody from Bihar saying, you know, this is wonderful what you're doing. And that, I think, is the power of social media. Two-way communication is the future, to be very honest.
Got it. Actually, yes, the theme of this particular event was to learn from international organizations, international companies, international businesses, or in per se, international political parties, and how we can create a local impact behind that. I have don't know been very impressed with Australian politics and leadership, especially because they've cured the problem of COVID so well in their country, and how well they have addressed problems over there. Are there any countries or are there any international politicians or international political parties that you look up to, from where we should learn, or from where we can derive ideas and try and implement here? And does that happen often?
Australia has been great with COVID management, but their immigration policies are still extremely problematic. Just the precursor there. Right. I wouldn't say that all nations are that developed nations are particularly doing better, because you saw the United States and the sort of storm that it was just by sheer ignorance and not allowing the CDC and Dr. Fauci to function. Now it seems better. There's no standard as to say developed or underdeveloped or third world nations, as we call them, though wrong, are not doing well or are doing really badly. I think every nation has had a collective experience with COVID. There are certain paths that we can take in. However, the sheer population, the sheer economic strata from which Indians come from, make it extremely hard to extrapolate or even try and implement one of those policies coming in. The US exercise was probably the closest for us, though extremely skewed in terms of population. My favorite experience was probably New Zealand. The fact that they were extremely strict, extremely strong in their policies, in terms of whether it was lockdown, in terms of vaccination, which has now happened, in terms of, basically keeping people away, and the social welfare benefit that they gave. New Zealand did well, but New Zealand is not even 1% of India's population. Right. I think all these other nations have been able to do better because, one, education, two, awareness, three, a certain amount of homogeneity in territory and terrain. Even across, how big is New Zealand? There are probably more sheep than humans, right? Even US, countries like Dubai did very well because of the population, because of the metric and the identifiers and all of that. India's experience has been subpar, extremely painful, but the things we should have implemented was social welfare benefit, unemployment benefit, and also in terms of allowing the food, the rations to go around. Our policy has been extremely hard to implement because of, one, the economic financial burden, because we have been in, people may disagree, but we've technically been in downturn. We're basically looking at falling growth. And as much as you want to change the metric of GDP measurement, you realize that we're not doing as well economically. Second is illiteracy, right? So India's experience, even African nations are not as big as us. All of Africa collectively, right, also is still doing better because smaller population. So I would believe that now with Biden's another $1 trillion package, I would say the social welfare that is being afforded is critical for India to get in. The most important thing is vaccination, that you cannot have a disparaged policy about. You have to vaccinate everybody and at the government's cost. And it should not be that you disadvantage rural and urban people by putting up an app for vaccination. So overall, I think bits and pieces of different nations have shaped what I think India needs. But the Indian experience is probably uniquely complicated. So I wouldn't know how you could have an all-round policy for India.
Aiyshwarya, I have in the past been a very hopeful person all my life. Correct. I have always hoped that there will be better. I have always hoped that we will come out of a problem. I have always hoped and maybe also worked towards solving problems and not sitting and cribbing and crying about it. Correct. But today, from the past few months, and I agree that I think most of them will be feeling this, that most of us feel extremely helpless, correct? Helpless in terms of we are not able to contribute. Our leadership is failing us. Nobody is coming forward and solving our basic problems, correct? And that's the sentiment that is across the board. With the center failing, with politics failing, with leadership failing, with social welfare organizations failing, right? With so many failures around us, is there still a hope for this country? Do you still think we will come out of this safer and better, especially out of this pandemic? I mean, if you could give me some words of hope and some strategies I think all of us will leave today's meeting with a smile.
To be very honest, I feel exactly the way that you feel. I probably have had it like because I'm on the ground and because my day, like today's probably the day that I've literally taken off because I'm isolating. Otherwise, I'm sitting at my Taluk hospital trying to ensure people have beds and remdesivir and so on. This has been a situation of absolute hopelessness. A lot of it man-made. It makes you question a lot of what you believe in. This has been extremely hard emotionally, physically, mentally for people. And I fear for our entire generation that we'll never mentally, emotionally be the same again. That we have, that we have normalized, that we have sort of desensitized ourselves, to the idea of death. I was recently in the emergency room after all of this, and I see this every day, right? I see the bodies and everything being taken away. It's emotionally, it kills you. I remember being in the emergency room for what I thought was COVID, but it was a respiratory infection. And there were two people next to me who, within a span of 10 or 12 minutes, passed away. So there was a person alive, and then they weren't. Right? And this has been extremely traumatizing that people have lost family members, they've lost everything that they have. But, I think hope springs eternal. I honestly believe that society has been the greatest victor and savior of this country. Every day I would be depressed on Twitter or on Facebook to see we need this, we need that. But just the human hope of people saying, I will help you, just the sort of kinship and brotherhood being displayed all across where people are going above and beyond to help people is where it shows me that there's hope for this country. Because right before this pandemic, we're a deeply divided society. We're an extremely divided on communal, religious, caste-based lines. And here I see humanity and people all across coming about, rising above. I had a friend who was fasting and wanted to donate plasma because it was extremely critical. Right. And she's one of the most, extremely rigid about this, the complete time and whatnot. And she broke her fast and she's older. And I said, why? And she says, what is the point of like doing rosa when I can't save humanity? And this has been the sort of wonderful stories that give me hope every day, that when society comes together to help, because the government has failed you. Politicians largely have also failed you, let's be honest, right? And people themselves realizing that the system is not going to help itself, we need to help. The number of youngsters I know doing ration kit drives, the number of youngsters who are cooking 3 extra meals at home, taking it and giving it to the daily wage laborer, the number of youngsters who are paying for bus tickets out of their pocket money, the number of youngsters who are donating blood and plasma, and the number of youngsters who are helping ferry oxygen cylinders, driving cars, ambulances. This is my hope. That as bad as it gets, I think the only triumph has been that people rose above those narrow communal, caste, faith-based lines and came together to save society, because you're forced to save yourself. And I'm really hopeful that though the pandemic takes away a lot from us, I think we will realize that when things like COVID or a pandemic or war come to you, it's not going to differentiate between rich and poor. It's not going to differentiate between Hindu, Muslim, Christian. It's not going to differentiate between rural, urban. It's going to hit you all the same. So you might as well stand together and fight it. And that's my hope. And that's how it keeps me going. Otherwise, well, I don't think I'd be in a position
Thank
to
you. Thank you for giving a wonderful answer and hope through your answer to all of us. And I'm sure everybody has taken your message very seriously, that it is us and it is me and it is my students and it is you who has to come out of it. And we have to depend on ourselves and relentlessly work to come out of COVID. Before I ask you for your closing remarks and before I end this conversation, there are some students who want to ask questions to you. If you may please, can I bring them on screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. Kaushik, I'll hand it over to you. I think Kajol Bhandari wants to ask a question. Kajol, if you can switch on your mic and speaker and ask your question. Kajol, your mic. Kajol, switch on your mic. Yeah, I think you're good. Good to go.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, so my question to you is, what I feel is, without having a family political background, it is not easy for me to get into politics. So any comment on this?
No, absolutely. I do admit that, a lot of people take you, it's quite sad. A lot of people do take you seriously when you come from a political family. This is also the same as if your father is the CEO of a company and you start as an intern, they're still going to give you preferential treatment. It's the same if your father's a doctor. This is not just politics. It happens everywhere except politics, I think, because it's not education, vocation, profession based, it's different. I think that is the sad reality. But I have seen a lot of people joining the organization as youngsters and rising up the ranks, right? There's Youth Congress if you want to volunteer. There's across whichever political party, there's always a youth wing. You can start working. There's also a lot of people I know that become leaders in society. They do social service, they do civil society movements, and then probably join politics as well. These entry barriers are always going to exist, but it's a capability argument. If I was also not a politician, I'm from a political family, and if I had started off in the Youth Congress, which I did, by the way, and even in Delhi, when I worked in Delhi, people didn't know who my father was. Nobody knew what it was. And when you work and you prove your capability is when you get rewarded. The entry barrier is hard. So maybe like start off with a youth organization or start out with social service and then tie up with the political party, and that will make it easier for you.
Thank you.
Kajol, that answered your question. Thank you. Aiyshwarya, so through the process of asking you questions, I have tried and asked all the questions that I have received from the students to you. So I hope that I still have a lot of questions that are there with me, but due to the time, I'm not going to be able to ask these questions. But as a closing remark, Aiyshwarya, can I see you as India's next Prime Minister? Are we hoping that something like this will happen? And if you have any closing remarks, please do share with us.
My friends have a very funny hashtag, which is AM for PM, which is Aiyshwarya Mahadev for PM. But honestly speaking, I'm 28. I am extremely blessed that I'm here today. I don't know where my political journey will take me, but the one thing that drives me is I have a duty to give back. So irrespective of what position I'm in, because it takes people like, decades. I've seen people who are 40 are at the place that I am. So I'm blessed with what I have, which means there's an added responsibility that I have to give back. I don't know what political position I'll ever be in, but for me, let's say the future is if I'm able to change and revolutionize the place I come from, if I'm able to serve my people to the best of their abilities, because the best of my abilities, because they deserve, nothing less than anybody in an urban area, I think I'll be happy. CM, PM, anything, I don't know where it'll take me, but I'm here for the long haul. I want to be able to serve and stay on the ground, and that's my dream, to be very honest.
Awesome. Aiyshwarya, if you have to give us the final 3 pointers that today's students should remember before they vote, today's students should remember about politics, things that they should be critical about, things that they should be confident about, if there are any final 3 or 4 pointers that you would like to give.
The only thing I ask everybody before they vote is how many times have you seen your candidate before the election? That's literally the one pointer I give everybody, because an election is not a once in a 5-year exercise. Democracy is exercised every day. Every time you voice your opposition to something wrong happening, every time you ask for your representative to do something, that is democracy and politics action. When you go, all I ask you is, somebody's caste is determined by his birth. Somebody's money is determined by his financial acumen. Somebody's post is determined by a party. But what you need to think about is this person serving the society? Is he going to do good for me? Because all the money he has, he's going to keep it. His caste doesn't determine anything. His faith doesn't determine anything. If he's the man working every day, and if you've seen him more than once in 5 years, or even like 7 working on the ground, he deserves your vote irrespective of political party, because your political ideology is not saving you today. Your political ideology is not getting you a bed or an ICU or a ventilator or even oxygen. What is happening is who are serving. People who serve deserve the chance, even if you believe he may or may not win. It is about reinforcing the fact that people like that deserve your vote. And as conscious youngsters, I really, really believe that you are intelligent enough to discern and know who deserves your vote based on capability and merit, and not by a birth lottery that determines what a person is. And I'm sure all of y'all are educated enough. I'm sure all of y'all are vocal enough to be able to do that. And the one thing I want to conclude with is all of us are extremely privileged. We are extremely blessed right now that we're not being hit by the pandemic the way people on the streets are. So if you can reach out and help, that would be the greatest way of doing your role. You never have to do it after the pandemic. It's not a force. But if you can help even one person more, because I see this every day and I tell everybody this, that if you can help one family, if you can help one person even, I feel like you would have done a lot more for society than you can by being in politics or even being on TV or even like doing anything else. But charity starts at home and right outside. So please, I urge all of you to be more conscious of that and just help the people who need it. And I'll be very grateful if that does happen. Thank you.
Right.